Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm gonna talk about Ishura Season 2, Episode 9. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. A lot of interesting surprises in this episode. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up with Yukiharu, who was on his way to Arimo village, but he's getting there after Nofelt already shut the place down and has got guards outside. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into this. Him and his compatriot, they feel like they kind of got a little bit of a Sherlock and Watson thing going on there, but maybe that's just me looking into. But Yukiharu was able to it was both of them playing a role in, but him in particular, he's very insightful. He's looking at okay, there's footprints going this direction, and then obviously there's a whole bunch of carriages coming this direction. So people from the village ran away, but they all got killed and their bodies are being brought back. Figure that Nofelt is here and that he's the one kind of keeping this information down, locked down on what happened. So he was like, okay, whatever this massacre was, it definitely wasn't Aracia behind it, because if they were, it would have been a lot more neater than this, because this is sloppy. And then he's also right, this must be about the royal games, because he also knows about Uhulk, because there's the rumors about an ogre staying with an old lady, so that kind of came to their purview. But I was like, man, you were really insightful on piecing all this together, because now the question is well, they're going to make their way to the final lands, because once again, taking photos and stuff, and he claims to be a reporter just to those Okahu soldiers or mercenaries, but I'm curious, is he actually one? What is he looking for at the final lands? I guess he's looking for answers the same way Shulk is, but very different answers maybe. But I'm curious what his reasoning is to do, because once again, he's going out of his way. He wanted to meet, was it Neff last episode, but then he was like, and that's probably not a good idea. It's well, what about Ramzo? And it's probably not a good idea to try to meet him either. So everything is related to the true Demon King and stuff. But yeah, I love that he's around those guys, and he immediately picks up okay, so if I go with these guys, they're going to kill me, because they were hoping not to be noticed by anyone either. And I love playing it off of being hey, I was supposed to meet with someone from Eurasia, and the voice in his in the box on his back is the one acting like he's talking already. I was oh, that's really good, that's nice. But she was even yo, don't put me in that situation ever again. I hate having to improvise really quickly. He's sorry about that. But yeah, yeah, if we don't find what we're looking for in the final lands, are we gonna go to Okahu? And he was not really sure. So they're kind of wondering and kind of playing this by ear in a lot of ways. So I thought that was fascinating. So it's gonna be interesting to continue seeing what Yukiharu is up to, him and that mysterious voice in his box. But then we immediately kind of check in on Okahu, and they're basically putting together mercenary squads, because and I felt so stupid because they kept calling it a visitor. Kazuki kept calling her a visitor, and I constantly keep forgetting visitor has a different connotation in this world. It's not till later on when we see her dog tags and they say Japan. I was oh, you're from the distant world. I was of course. I was that's why I had to be reminded, right, visitor has a different connotation in this world. But yeah, we see Shulk. We haven't seen him since what's that, maybe the second to last episode? I think it was the second or third to last episode of I think it was the same episode Dakai died. Daki died, maybe. I'm trying to remember. I think it might have been around. It was definitely around that time. It might have been in season finale. I don't remember, but it was around the time before Lithia fell. What's the last time we saw him? So he's wandering around. I love that conversation he has with that guy. Was it Milieu? And because he asked him, he was oh, how long have you been alive? And Shulk's that's a funny way of asking that. It's I died 2 years ago, So once again, this is all for the purposes of trying to get answers, because he's trying to figure out, because we find out why he's interested in Kazuki. He's like, because he was asking Kazuki, like, are you the hero? And she's like, no. People constantly make that mistake because 9 years ago, she freed a town that was under control by the demon, the true demon king, and by herself. And people kind of wonder, like, oh, the word about her being a hero or the hero is spread around. But she apparently was part of the first party of people who saw that the true demon king was dead. So you're like, interesting. So I was about to say, because she's definitely not part of the original like party that well, I think, did they say like dead or did they say disappeared? I think they used the word disappeared, like the true demon king wasn't around anymore. But like, I don't think they said dead. But maybe, I don't remember like the exact wording like Shulk had used. But anyway, it seems her thing is she's a bit of a wanted character in the regards of she's good with guns and she's able to like curve bullets. So I was like, oh, that's fascinating. But yeah, anyway, like this mercenary crew is being put together. Shulk wanted to kind of be more on the offensive, but the guy Milieu was like, yo, you'll kind of mess up our plans if you're there. He's like, fine, I'll play defense then. And so ironically, literally everyone else except for that one ogre with his shield died. So it's kind of funny how the one guy on defense ended up being the one to kind of end it. But we'll get to that soon enough. But speaking on Kazuki, you had that one ogre who was in a carriage being like, oh, I've dodged 4 bullets. The only one I have is this one. And then immediately gets taken out. Him and another dude get taken out by a single bullet because she's able to curve them. It's I don't know if that's like, and they said curve, so I was like, it doesn't seem like it's ricochet. Because that one guy that tried to go for the gun near the carriage, the bullet, I don't know if it ricocheted or not. It looked like it might have ricocheted. It also looked like it might have just moved on its own, but it probably did ricochet, which timing of that's interesting because I'm currently watching Sakamoto Days, and there's a character that's very, like his whole shtick is ricocheting bullets as kind of a sniper, so it's kind of interesting how that works out, timing-wise and stuff. But yeah, Kazuki meets with the kid who is kind of like the arms dealer, and you're like, oh, interesting. They met each other 13 years ago. I was like, what? I was like, you've been here for like, at least 13 years? I was like, that's fascinating. But I'm also like, because I guess in my head, I'd almost want, because it hasn't been that long since the true demon king died. So I was like, because one thing, hadn't it only been like single digit years? I keep forgetting the exact number, but I was like, wow. Because I guess in my head, I was almost thinking like, did the true demon king's death set in motion so that visitors can come to this world? But it's probably like, this world's probably always had visitors over the time, but it seems like it's ramped up even more now. I think like there might be someone connected to all of this. It ends up being part of that interesting conversation because Kazuki's bringing up like Yukiharu and Morio and like Yuga. These are people she's like, we're all kind of from the same country, Japan, but it's like, and even the kids like, yeah, like that's interesting because we usually visitors used to come from different cultural spheres. So it's interesting to know, like, for whatever reason, they've been mainly pulled from the same region more recently and more rapidly because there's a lot more. Because I'm about to say at first, I'm like, oh man, is Kazuki like the only other one around? But it's like, no, this kid is one, Yukiharu, and I guess that's supposed to be maybe your giveaway about someone if they have like a regular last name. Like Morio's last name is a regular Japanese last name, so you're like, oh, okay. So makes you wonder how long has this world had visitors and how many are still around, especially because we found out, I mean, maybe this dropped in season 1, I don't remember, but apparently like they don't age. Because I was like, the kid's like, oh yeah, we met like Kazuki's like, oh yeah, we met like 13 years ago, and she's like, and just casually drops the fact is that visitors don't age in this world. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder why that is. Because I mean, that's the thing with visitors. It's like you're kind of deadly because visitors coming from a different world tend to be. It's interesting because it kind of has a similar connotation, and I might have made this parallel in season 1. I don't remember, but like, obviously it's fresher in my mind. It's like Tower of God. It's kind of like regulars versus irregulars. It's kind of an interesting, like, similar concept of like, yo, the irregulars are the ones who kind of come into the tower and kind of mess stuff up because they end up being insanely powerful monsters. So visitors tend to fall into that category. So it's interesting. Kazuki is also a little sadistic. I was not expecting her shtick to be like, oh, she sings while she murders. I don't know if it's necessarily like intent, but it's just like it goes hand in hand with like her fighting and killing people. She's singing along while doing it. So But the kid's like, oh, like, why do you go off on your own? Because he's like, it's kind of deadly for you to go off on your own. Because she's like, you're going to participate in the games, right? And he's basically like, everyone that's, referencing Takai, Regneji, even the dragon that Alice killed in episode 2. It's like, Erasia is trying to eliminate all possible champions except for like they're trying to limit the pool of champions out there in the world. And so it's kind of like you might be on the chopping block too, so you need to be careful. Like you're here because you're hired by Erasia, but you need to be careful because you're just as likely on the Deadpool list as well. And I don't know whether it's confidence believing she would never die or that no one can beat her. I mean, everyone meets their end at some point in time. Like no one's, necessarily unkillable, but there's everyone meets their match eventually. Or whether it's just she kind of, because it didn't seem like she expected her death later on, which we'll get to in a second, which was kind of shocking. But because her question, like her main thing was, yes, she's here for Erasia because they asked her to be, but also she wanted to speak to Morio because she had a single question, and that was specifically about like maybe Morio has a piece to the puzzle of why the visitor situation has been more allocated from one country now, and why like maybe they've been having more and more and more pop up in more recent years. It seems to be the case. Because it seems, like I said, visitors seem to be very rare in the past, but in more recent years, it's escalated with how many ended up being here all at once. Which is interesting that we're getting introduced to more and more visitors, not just beings from this world. But yeah, she led an assault on Akahu. Once again, murdered everybody. That poor guy where she like threw the gun and then like she got on top of like the gun and like I guess at close range fired the bullet. I don't think she just shoved the gun in his head, but I don't think she pierced his head with the gun. I think she was above him, like fired the gun that was like pointed at his head, and just immediately killed everyone, especially the Milieu guy. Which even she was like, "Wow, you were supposed to be like." You're the one I was supposed to be, the one that might stand a chance. But the one she wasn't expecting was the quiet one, Shulk, who was simply on defense. And I was actually kind of bummed when she died. I was like, oh, that sucks. Oh, man. I was like, oh, this is your episode. And nope, it's not your episode. It's kind of Shulk's episode. Because I was like, had Shulk not really had a proper introduction previously? I thought he did in season 1. But maybe he... Because I know he fought against Sojiro, but I don't... Maybe he never did get a proper introduction. Like, I know we got introduced to him because he was like one of him and like, was it Higure were introduced because they were both hired by Erasia. Because, was it Luna or Lana? Ended up like bringing them in to... Yeah, I don't remember. Like, I could have sworn Shulk had already had one, but I guess not. Which is sad, and I guess in retrospect, it's like, when you look at Kazuki's introduction, it doesn't end the same way other people's does, because it's usually that still frame and their name, but like hers was just in the animation itself. It's not the still frame, like, lighting thing that they normally do, so that should have been a giveaway, and now we gave it to Shulk instead. I even love like it says her name and then it slices through it. Cause her going up against Shulk, I was like, oh, she's gonna die, isn't she? I was like, especially because he's like, I need to know, one, if I beat you and kill you, I can take your entry into the Royal Games. She's like, sure, whatever. And then was like, do you recognize these bones? Like, you were part of the first party after the true Demon King died, so were my bones there? And she's like, first time I've ever met you. And he ended up instantly killing her. And like I said, she was just so like, no way about it, and died. I mean, I guess that kind of speaks volumes that Sojiro did a good enough job. I mean, because even he kind of got sliced up a little bit fighting Shulk, because Shulk is stupid fast. And so is Sojiro too, but, the fact that Sojiro walked away from that situation, because I think even Shulk was not fully sure if he'd win that fight, if I remember correctly. He's kind of like, yeah, probably wouldn't. Like, I think that fight got interrupted. I don't remember, like, why that fight ended the way it did. It ended up in a draw and then walking away. I just don't remember the context for it. Which is ironic now, because they both are, well, because I was about to say no, because he's working for Akahu, and Sojiro's working for Erasia, so I don't know. But I was I was actually kind of sad that Kazuki, because like we don't know anything about like the whole reason why she sings and stuff like that. We really didn't know about that. Like I'm wondering if the song she's singing must have some significance. Once again, also like her having like military dog tags, kind of like there's something there too, but it's like all a moot point now. Like I think that was kind of supposed to be the point. Like the episode in particular is supposed to subvert your expectations. Like that's why I was almost wondering, like, is it going to end in a draw? Because I was like, I feel like Shulk would kill her, and he did it instantly. Just as she got off a shot, he'd already killed her. It's like, we'd already seen the whole thing about how the arrow bounced off his bone. So it's like, I guess that was supposed to be like a wink and nod. And like I said, even like her introduction, how it wasn't fully like other people's, especially like the ending, how that was done. I guess that was supposed to be the sign. So, but yeah, Shulk isn't any closer to finding out whether or not he is the hero. Because he doesn't remember anything prior to his life. And I'm like, maybe we knew that from last season and I just didn't remember that he has amnesia about who he was. He only remembers awakening as Bones, So maybe we'll get an introduction to Morio at some point in time, especially because like Akahu, now that Lithia has been defeated and is gone, this is standing as like the strongest region outside of that, which is so fascinating because you're like, interesting how like Shulk went from that place to this place. But I guess he figured like I want to go where the strongest align and lie, because maybe they'll have answers that are related to. I mean, he especially came here because of the whole Kazuki of it all. So, but I guess that also means there's no point of talking to anyone else that might have been part of that first party of like discovering the true Demon King's body. Then, if that's the case, considering if she doesn't know you, anyone else not less anyone else in that party is already dead. So it's also interesting too, because the kid gave her that warning about her, and it's like, I mean, typically it's like a ratio related to like people dying, like you being a champion and stuff like that. But it's also like technically it's like, well, Shulk wanted specifically your entry into the game, so other than that, he probably wouldn't have bothered fighting you. But he's also like a mercenary where it's like, I see my contracts through to an extent. So I don't know. There's just a lot. Like I said, I'm just kind of sad. I was like, oh man, that's kind of, like I said, but it's meant to subvert your expectation because you expect her to be around at least a little while longer. I'm like, this might, because yes, we've been introduced to characters in the same episode that they died, but like someone that's kind of presented as one of the champions to end up dying in the same episode to introduce doesn't happen. So, but once again, this wasn't her episode. This was Shulk's episode. So, fair play in that regard, I guess. But yeah, I'm very interested to see where the next episode ultimately ends up taking us going forward into, next episode will follow this. I said that the weirdest way possible. I'm sorry. Brain fog. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.